Hey yo, what it did, y'all? Let's get right into it. It's time to talk about T17s just because I kind of just want to get this video out of the way, so to speak, because I think there's a lot of more exciting things to talk about this league. Talking about King's March, talking about potential farming strategies, talking about, well, in some cases, the overall stillness of farming strategies in the game right now, etc., etc. But if I don't address the elephant in the room that is T17's first, I definitely will forget. Which means that we have to talk about it now, unfortunately. Because, well, they didn't solve the fucking problem. Just plain and simply put, I feel like the changes to T17s didn't actually hit the mark at all. In fact, honestly, I barely noticed what they said that did change about T17s, and it definitely does not make the gameplay feel any better. I still don't feel any better about trying to engage with T17s. I feel like all of the problems that existed previously are still present, and the only thing that's really changed is technically some HP bars and maybe the loot a little bit, even though it's still more loot than the rest of what I'd be getting from playing the game otherwise, right? Just overall leaving a pretty bad taste in my mouth, and I felt like I should go ahead and just get this out here now. So, as per usual, help me out on the algorithm a little bit, like comment, subscribe, turn notification on, all that good stuff. Just to help us out. We're on our way to 1,000. It'd be pretty cool to get that number just to see the 4 digits. Hell yeah. Anyways, here's the core of the take, right? When we were told that T17s were coming, right? They were like, hey guys, we have this new bossing content. This idea being that we're going to bridge the gap between regular pinnacle bosses and uber pinnacle bosses because we felt that there was too steep of a gap between them. We were like, ooh, awesome, more progression bossing. And instead, what we got is a mapping upgrade, which I'm not going to pretend that endgame mapping didn't need its own upgrades, but that topic is a video for another time, right? When I have more well-founded opinions on how I feel about endgame mapping. Right now, endgame mapping is still a little bit of a blur and not the focus of this video. Talking in this video specifically is about what T17s have actually done compared to what we thought we were getting, and how not only has it not done what we thought we were going to be getting, but also it just sucks to interact with, right? Because for bossing content, Abomination is still overtuned to date, right? Like it's not like Abomination became reasonable. Sanctuary, not Sanctuary. Well, Sanctuary is a bit of a problem, but in the same way that like Exarch is a problem, right? The like Lycia Maze thing just doesn't feel particularly incredible on this perspective. I was actually thinking of Ziggurat when I was thinking of the overtuned League mechanic boss that got brought in, just in terms of the incredible amount of like phys mitigation required to handle her, and even then just the constrictions on the arena in tandem with the modifiers that you can roll on these maps, which we'll get to that in a bit. Before I go all negative, I do need to give one slight positive, which is that the Scarab of Bisection does make getting your progression T17 notably easier. I am a big fan of the fact that it was actually very reasonable to just get a Scarab of Bisection, bisect your T17, run your first one so that you can get the map slot opened up from it. That was a good change. You get 1 point from me. Now I'm going to take that point away. The Scarab of Bisection wouldn't need to be a thing if the modifiers on T17s weren't so fucking terribly designed. We've complained for years about modifier design in general, and at some point, you just kind of like say, fuck it, I guess it is what it is. Like, I guess it is what it is that I can roll chance to avoid elemental ailments on maps while I'm playing an Ignite build. I guess it is what it is that I can roll percent to reflect damage that, honestly, the percentage of reflect doesn't matter. That shit could say 0.2% reflect, and you would still end up nuking yourself because of how much damage you do relative to your own health bar. And especially when you factor in the number of targets that you can hit. I guess it is what it is when I roll like reduced damage from crit strikes, although that modifier at least is a lot less punishing. It is what it is when my charge stacker can have its charges stolen, right? Like, a lot of these map modifiers, you just kind of like cope through, except for, you know, some really bad examples. And usually the only really truly egregious cases of this come in with map modifier effect, such as, you know, ailment avoidance scaling up to literally 100 over 100% with modifier effect, even on normal maps now. But especially if you think like Cortex originally, right? That was always one of the big problems. You try to play Cortex on an Ignite build, you open your Cortex, that Cortex says chance to avoid it, elemental ailments, you leave the map because it's unplayable, right? And so this binary design of, what do you call it? This binary design of modifiers was already bad before T17's. And T17's just made the problem worse, much worse. Like, I think it says a lot when I think that one of the better designed modifiers on T17's literally just says -20 to max res. We're going to ignore that if your character is at 90 all res, that in fact makes you take 3 times the damage that you were taking from those resistance stats, right? We're going to ignore that for a second. At least it doesn't hard turn off your build, I guess. It just makes you notably squishier. You know, somehow monsters have 100% increased AoE just makes more sense. Even though, again, we start to talk about things like I mentioned the Katarina fight, because Katarina's AoEs are actually pretty oppressive even in regular size. And at 100% ink AoE, it's actually really bad how big they are, right? Like we've been through this with T17 modifiers, and then there's still the ones that turn off your builds. Like Charge Steel was bad enough, but if your build was ranged and very efficient and very quick about generating charges back, you could at least recover from taking some hits and get your charges back online and have your character still function. But cannot gain charges completely cooks those builds. Oh, less AoE, accidentally scale with a little bit of map modifier effect, and look at that. Suddenly all of your skills with AoE components do literally nothing now, right? Because their AoE is literally 0, etc. You end up with these modifiers that completely suck, completely brick builds. It is not a matter of how do you play around this modifier. It is not like when you roll a double damage mod plus maybe something really tanky on your maps and you go, can I outplay this? That's not the question you find yourself asking in T17's. You look at the mod pool and go, does this brick my build? And if you have to ask yourself if it bricks your build, we have a completely different problem. We can't be bricking builds through modifiers. And that's the core problem with T17's. There's a ton of other things that don't really work about T17's, but this is the main thing that needs to be addressed. Your build has to, you know, it's a checkbox. And if you don't check each checkbox, that map is unplayable for you. And so the result is that you spend dozens, if not potentially hundreds of chaos rolling, using multi-line regexes to actually like find the maps that you can run, because there's such a deep modifier pool that you actually need multiple lines of regexes. We can only use 50 characters, but it takes far more than 50 characters to make that make sense, right? That's the real problem with T17's. There's some other things in there that stand out, right? I only mentioned the offensive turn-off mods, by the way. There's also stuff like cannot block. Nice defensive layer bozo. Cannot suppress spell damage. Nice defensive layer bozo, right? Like turning off aspect of builds is bad. Straight up bad. Get it the fuck out of the game. Straight up. Now that I've addressed my primary like gameplay concern, because I actually don't have any issues with the specific bosses themselves, like at a base level, right? At a base level, they're all fine. Maybe you could look at like slightly fucking retuning Abomination, because design wise, it is definitely a little bit more atrocious than some of the Ubers that exist. But whatever, I'll let it be, because the modifiers really amplify all the problems. If modifiers weren't so bad that we needed a scarab to turn off half the modifiers, I think we'd be in a much better place. Now, the other half of this thought is I do not like what it's done to the farming landscape in the game, especially with the changes that we got this league. Probably seen it already. People talking about how bad ground loot feels. You've probably felt this yourself. Like, you're probably getting good currency in your maps, but it's not because of the monster that you killed. It's because of something else. a loot tile, a altar, you know, ship it, like a shipment, etc. And it all kind of just roots down to the fact that ground loot was already like not in the greatest position ever, and they got further neutered because of what T17s were able to pull off last league through ways of amping up ground loot. But it's also just because T17s have 2 to 3 times the amount of monsters that a T16 has, and 2 times or more of the quant that said T16 has, as well as special modifiers that don't exist on T16s to increase your drops even further. And then, you know, like, and then they also are the entry point for Uber bosses. So Uber bosses need T17 runners. So you're getting a large influx of money on the back end of that as well from killing the boss and getting the fragment. You see what I'm getting at with all of these points here? The problem with T17s is that you're either a bosser who is mad about the existence of T17s because they're not really content for you, they're content for mappers, or you're a mapper who is more or less infuriated, I guess is the best word to use, like infuriated, livid with the idea that you will never really be able to compete currency wise until you can run these maps as efficiently as possible, but the requirements for doing so feel so prohibitive for something that's supposed to be bridge content between 2 other already pre-existing levels of content. And that is not good. Now, how would I solve this? Look, I'm gonna be real with you. I didn't make this video to provide solutions. That's not my fucking job. I'm a player, just like you, right? We open up PoE for hours on end. We spend money on supporter packs, all that good stuff, right? Like that's my job here. But I do think that the biggest problem is that the play experience needs to be better. It's not really about a matter of barrier to entry or anything, but you need to make it feel better. The same way that like I genuinely think that the mapping experience became a little bit more accessible for majority of plays, even if there are design problems with it still, with the move from sextants to scarabs, just simply due to reduction of trade friction involved in the process of actually getting to juice your maps in that direction. The actual ability to access it, opening that up to more people generally makes the game better, right? And I feel like T17s are a step in the complete opposite direction, where the sheer amount of friction that you get from the game, right? It's not like trading in PoE where your friction comes from the fact that other people are acting in your disinterest, but it's specifically that the game is in your disinterest here. The game is set up in a way to piss you off, just like when Benevolent Guardian was still in the game, right? Or the original version of Benevolent Guardian was in the game, right? Like the game is acting against you, and that feels horrible because there is nothing you can do about it. There's no solution for the game being questionably designed. And so I would take a deep look at the modifier pool, because I think anytime your solution to something being trash is to just provide an option to directly circumvent it, means that you should probably just look at the core of what's actually wrong in the first place. That's going to be all for me, right? We need these changes. I would hope that we get a hot fix about it this league. I can't believe we didn't get any notes about it this league at all, but hopefully at least, you know, maybe after PoE 2, it's early access, we'll finally get changes to T17s that make them like worth fucking interacting with, at least for most people, right? Like, sure, I could go make a Giga character and go farm them. Like, I've done that before. I did that last league. But, like, I want them to actually be a reasonable part of the content loop instead of whatever in the world they are now. Thank you for, listening. Like the video if you agree, or maybe if you disagree, and you could like the video just because you like the perspective that I provide. Drop some comments down below as far as like how you feel about T17s. I do expect it to be a hate thread, but if you've got some positive thoughts about it or just other suggestions, I like to hear those. Subscribe to the channel with the notifications on. Really all helps me out. Share the video, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.